When it comes to containing costs in healthcare, everyone has their 2 cents to give. But what do those of us in the business of health insurance have to say? This is Health Sense, and I'm your host, attorney Adam Russo, CEO and co-founder of the FIA Group, a firm with over 25 years experience navigating this ever-changing industry. Join me and my guests as we make sense of effective ways to reduce the skyrocketing cost of healthcare while improving quality outcomes for patients. The only thing it will cost you is 30 minutes of your time. So let's get right to the bottom line and reimagine what healthcare could be. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Health Sense with me, your host with the most, Adam Russo, the show that gets right to the bottom line on ways to reduce healthcare costs while improving. Improving is the key word there. Quality outcomes for patients. We are sponsored by the FIA Group, the leading cost containment firm in the country focused on ensuring everyone gets access to high quality, low cost care. As I love to tell people, the main problem with healthcare in America can be tied to Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, folks, that is our current system. And you guys always love when I have that word of the day. So what is the word of the day? It's not a word. It's 3 words, but I'm going to make it 1 word because that ties into their website. The word of the day is benefits all in. Benefits all in. And folks, as you all know, I'm always looking for something unique, different. I've been in this industry. Well, I've been the CEO and founder of FIA for 26 years, but I've been in this industry for 32 years. But I am 52 years old, and this industry is all I know. And anytime I see something different, something innovative, something unique, I'm going to bring it to the table. With that in mind, today's guest is Philip Martin. Yes, anytime you have a person with 2 first names, they're either really smart or really not. I don't know which one this guy's going to be, but we'll find out in a second. He is the Vice President of Benefits All In. Previously, he was a regional VP for Chubb for many years, and it looks like this guy graduated, I believe, from Brown. Is that correct? In 1993. Really old guy, but looks really young. And I think you played on the football team as well, correct?
I wouldn't call what I did playing, but yeah, they gave me the pads and let me get knocked around a little bit. Absolutely.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm looking forward to talking a little bit Ivy League football from the early 90s. Sounds really exciting. So, Philip, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and hopefully the guy with 2 first names, I come out on the better end of that proposition. Don't prove to be a complete knucklehead.
So people are probably like, why is Adam bringing him on the show? Can you tell us, because I was very intrigued, tell us a little bit in layman terms to all of our listening audience, everything about what is Benefits All In, what is the unique proposition that you're bringing to the marketplace, and why are you there?
Sure. The hardest part's the why, because it gets into the founder story. So I'll gloss over that a little bit, Adam,
Sure.
And we can come back to that. What we do is simple, not easy, quote John Wooden, but very, very simple. We engage with employees at any point in time. So the employer says, hey, Benefits All In, we want to partner with you. We engage with the employees to examine what they have available to them, their employer plan and alternate plans that they may have available. So if you did service to your country, you have access to TRICARE. If you're of a certain age or certain disposition, you may have access to Medicare. We all have access to the exchange and so forth. So they examine, they being our executive resource specialists at Benefits All In, examine your situation, say, hey, you have all this available to you. And a little more than 90% of the time, because employers do a really good job of providing fantastic benefits. So 90% of the time, those executive resource specialists, we call them the rescue squad because got to have a name for it, tell the employee, hey, this is your best option. You should stick with it. And somewhere around 10% of the time, slightly less, we say, hey, you've got other options available to you. You should probably look in, we can examine those with you and show you the cost benefit, and you should take advantage of those. That's it in a nutshell, Adam.
So are you telling me that people aren't aware of all of their benefit options? I mean, that's what the first thing you said, right? So
yeah.
Are there vets that aren't aware of that? Are there people that can't access Medicare and aren't aware, or other state plans, exchange plans? And if so, why would a person, let's say me, I'm on a self-funded plan, right? We are. Why would I even care? Why would I look? Why would an employer care?
Well, so what's interesting is I get asked all the time similar questions in the same vein, Adam. So I'm going to answer your first question first.
Okay.
No, most employees are not aware of all their options. Unfortunately, most employees aren't really intimately familiar with their own health plan until something happens. Now, I've been doing this exactly as long as you, Adam. But no, getting back on point, if you asked me how my plan treats an MRI, I'd have to probably go back and look at my SPD. I couldn't quote it to you off the top of my head. Now, you would think I would know. I know the lingo, I know the jargon, I know all the moving parts. But you think I'd probably know that off the top of my head. Now, I got 32 years as well behind me, so shame on me for not knowing that. But I've got an employee that's pick whatever industry you want. I'm going to say that they're a home health care provider. They're a trucker, or they're an accountant. Doesn't really matter what field. They're an insurance salesman, but they're not in this space. They're in property and casualty. If you ask them what their benefit is for an MRI, they're going to look at you crosswise. And if you ask them what other plans they have available to them, they're going to look at you and go, I didn't know I had plans available to me. And then if you ask them, hey, are you prior service? Did you serve your country in the military? Yes, I'm a jarhead. Yes, I came from the Army. All right. Those actually the prior service military, yes, they're intimately familiar with what they have available at TRICARE, but they may not know that they have certain benefits at point in time during claim that are available through TRICARE that may be better than their employer plan.
When you say better, give me an example of why, right? Let's just use the trucker example. I'm a trucker. I've been with the same company for 5 years, right? Never had anything major happen to me. I got a high deductible plan. I got a high copay, etc. How do you guys get involved? And what are you telling me as this truck driver who's got a health plan, who's been happy with it, right? Maybe I'm grumbling because every year the premiums go up and my copays go up. My deductible goes up. But, I'm like, it is what it is. It's what everyone's got. What do you guys do? What do you guys tell me that but for benefits all in, I would not have known?
So imagine the open enrollment experience where you have a really good benefit navigation tool that takes your available plans within the employer plan and runs. And again, this is another space in the marketplace that I think is improving but could stand some improvement. And it takes an arbitrary or made up claim and runs it through the system. And it says, hey, under plan A, this is your exposure. This is what you'd have to pay. And in plan B, this is your exposure. This is what you'd have to pay. Now that's at point in time, Adam. So that's during open enrollment. You've got an arbitrary or made up claim that's run through. And then you look at that and you go, okay, well, how much is it going to cost me? This one over here costs $100 a pay period. This one over here costs $50 a pay period. I make my decision after I see that example, and then I move on. And then 6 months, 9 months down the road, I have the dreaded unga bunga disease, or I have an appendicitis, or I have whatever it may be. And all that happened in open enrollment does what? Flies out the window. If you can remember that, I got another job for you. It starts, the trivia champion, that's just, people won't be able to remember that. Where the executive research specialist comes in, why I heard it said one time, and I agree, they do God's work, right? They sit down with you, Adam, and they say, okay, let's look at your claim at point in time. Let's look at what you have available in your employer plan, and let's compare that to what you may have available over here, and let's see what the total exposure looks like. Deductible, co-insurance, out-of-pocket, the premium exposure.
Pharmacy claims, everything.
Yeah, everything, all benefits, all in. Hence the name. So even though the name may sound a little corny at times, when you think about it, all in, what's your exposure? And as an employee at point in time, when you know your exposure, you can make an informed decision as opposed to relying on what you saw for 30 minutes at an open enrollment engagement 6 months ago.
So good. So give me an example. Give me one of those diseases, right? The unga bunga. And I'm sitting down with a consultant at Benefits All In. they're sitting there. I'm assuming they're not pushing me to do anything because that would be against the law. But they're giving me my options. And give me an example of a typical example of how I might say, oh my God, I'm going to switch to that plan because it's going to be better for me on a benefits all in. And how an employer then would also benefit. And because remember, folks, when you have a self-funded plan, not only is the employer putting money in to pay for claims, every employee is also putting their own money in to pay for all the claims for the entire population. First part is, give me a real example of why I might go, oh, I'm going to switch, and also how that would benefit the employer in the long run.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with my favorite claim example. It's a real one. I'm going to de-identify it a little bit, Adam, because obviously protected by law.
Right.
But a young family goes in. The mother has 2 children, prematurely, low birth weight, so premature birth. From a stop-loss carrier standpoint, by the way, that's the phrase you can say that will capture attention and cause dread probably more than any other. So premature birth, low birth weight, 26 weeks, and they're in facility, and they're worried, that family, of course, about their children and their health, right? So fast forward about 4 weeks in, the 2 children are in NICU, and the mother, who has access to benefits all in, gets a nice complimentary phone call from BAI saying, hey, by the way, just want to wish you well. Hope everything's going well. The mother took advantage of, hey, by the way, I want to know how I'm going to pay for all this. And I'm not doing justice to what she actually said, but that was the gist of it. And you could hear the concern in her voice. Not just, the concern for her children is paramount, but then also just the concern of this, this bill racking up and everything that they had to do. The executive resource specialist, so a real live working example of a benefit that doesn't get taken advantage of, access to path of care for that employee, specifically for their children, because they're in an expanded Medicaid state. Let's pause right there. How many employees know whether or not they're in one of the 40 states that have expanded Medicaid?
I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I had to go look. Again, you and I have been doing it for a long time. If I'm Joe or Jane Lunchbucket, there's no way I'm going to know. So that's the first thing. Let them know, hey, by the way, you're in a state that has expanded Medicaid. Your children may qualify on their own merit for Medicaid. Let's pause and hit another button. Most people, when they hear Medicaid, at least me, and I think everyone I've spoken to, thinks income qualification. For expanded Medicaid, these parents, by the way, did well for themselves. So they on their own would never have qualified for Medicaid from a financial burden standpoint. But expanded Medicaid doesn't look at the parents. The expanded Medicaid looks at the children as if they were, full-grown adults and says, hey, these children, do they make any money? No, they're 2 months old, 3 months old. They're barely out of the womb. So the executive resource specialist walks that employee through the scenario of them qualifying for expanded Medicaid, files on behalf of the employee, so fills out the paperwork, which if anyone here has done government paperwork, it makes the DMV look like a party, and then walks the employee through, again, the application process, the denial, the reapplication, and then eventually the acceptance of those 2 children. Now, again, I'm going to give you round dollar amounts. That overall total claim was north of $2 million. Not the biggest NICU claim you've ever heard of, but definitely one that would capture an employer's attention.
Of course, it's going to attract stop-loss carriers' attention. No question about it, right? You're going to be worried about if this person's going to be lasered the following year, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what's the option? So $2 million under the traditional, normal, self-funded plan without any involvement by benefits all in.
Yeah, sure. Let's play that out, actually, Adam, before I get to the happy ending. So now, just projecting that forward, if I'm the stop loss carrier, I'm on the hook for $1.6 million against a $400,000 spec on a $2 million claim. My quick math serves. And to your point, I'm going to have to hit that renewal with some sort of protection, a la laser. If I'm the employer, I just paid out $400,000, and I'm going to get a laser, which at that point in time was to be determined. But let's say it's another $500,000 or $1 million on that particular claimant. That's additional exposure that I'm going to have to account for in some way, shape, or form. And that renewal, more than likely, is going to be a rate cap renewal. So it's going to be a 50%, and move on down the road. And if they've got a no new laser, great, but still they're going to have additional exposure and they're going to get hammered to the point of 50% against what I think their stop loss premium was right around $1.6 million. So they're either way, they're going to have to take on additional exposure, no matter what mechanism that gets applied. And the employee, they got their deductible and they're out of pocket, and they filed, typical of hospitals, they filed under both plans. So who knows how that coordination is going to go between the two of them. But let's just assume that their out of pockets were the same. They were looking at on a high deductible health plan somewhere around $12,000 to $14,000. Could they afford it? Yes. Would they want to afford it? No. The happy ending for everybody, retroactive to $1 day one. Those two employees, that child was put on Medicaid under an expanded Medicaid and a Katie Beckett provision under TEFRA, which again, 32 years, Adam, before I came here, if you'd asked me what Katie Beckett was, I would have told you it's some dance people do at a barnstorming event. I would have had no idea, because it's not something that gets announced or that people get educated on at the employer level. Anyway, I get excited about it, so I'm going off path. So the child goes off plan, goes on Medicaid for basically for the total exposure of the claim. So that claim goes completely off plan. The stop loss carrier doesn't pay a nickel. The employer doesn't pay a nickel. It gets filed under expanded Medicaid, and the employees don't pay a nickel. Yeah. The hospital's happy about the adjusted reimbursement? Probably not. But everybody else is pretty excited. And then the good news is that child's now coming up on 19 months old and is in improving health, which is really
awesome. And that's the key, right? Again, If you look at our company's mission, it's to improve quality outcomes and lower costs. It seems like we're doing both in this scenario. So, folks, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Health Sense on Healthcare Now Radio with your host with the most, Adam Russo, and today's guest is Philip Martin, VP of Benefits All In. So, you gave me a great example, right? I get it. I've always wondered why more people don't get really good information during their enrollment. I always find it crazy to me that people are surprised. They always say, I hear this every day. I purchased health insurance. What do you mean I got an $8,000 deductible? What do you mean I got this copay? Whatever it might be, the scenario. And education is just lacking. Like the amount of time employers spend training their employees on whatever it is they got to train them on. The 401k plan even. Just there's so much info out there. Yet when it comes to their health plan, it's like you said, it's an hour max a year, which is absolutely nuts to me. So, but here's my question for you. Why would somebody say no to Benefits All In? What is the biggest obstacle that you guys face as a salesperson? I'm thinking to myself, why wouldn't I want to bring someone in that's going to tell all my employees and their family members what their options are? Because let's face it, people don't look at their plan documents or care about the details of their health benefits until they actually have a claim, a big claim, or a denial on a claim. So what's the number one reason someone says no to you?
There are two. Unfortunately, Adam, there are two, and they kind of fall in the same bucket, so I'm going to try to weave them together to meet your criteria. One, I think there's a function of misunderstanding, because when we describe what we do, a lot of people, particularly those that are paid to be very, very guarded and protect the employee welfare, they don't hear help. They hear navigation. They hear little key touch points around the process where they go, oh, so you move people off plan. Oh, you're really trying to just aggressively have people, cost contain. They don't hear look, we're not trying to tinker with efficacy in terms of the course of treatment. We're not tinkering with the site of care. We're not tinkering with the course of care. We're literally just saying you have other options to pay for the care. You need to make yourself aware of those. But the objection, Adam, to your point, stems with what people hear. And because they're sensitive to it, I'm not faulting anybody, but they've become hypersensitive to the notion of guiding people off plan because, I'm twirling my mustache and trying to hurt somebody.
So that's the key. Is that we have an industry where for years now, I would say at least a decade, there have been companies that have been aggressively going to employers saying, we're going to get this person off your plan. It doesn't even matter what the alternative is, but we're going to get them off your plan because they're a big expense. And I look at what you're doing extremely differently. Folks, I would not, as an attorney and a founder and CEO and a past chairman of SIA, I would never bring on a co-organization that I didn't feel was compliant with the law and doing right by plans, employers and their families. What you're doing goes back to what I probably should have used as my word of the day, giving people all the information, educating. All you're doing is telling people, hey, listen, Joe, you were in the military. Are you aware of this benefit? Hey, Mary, are you aware that you are in a state that's expanded Medicare? Are you aware of these other plan options, other coverage options that you may have available for you and your family going forward? To me, not being aggressive, just informing people of what options are available to them in their specific situation is the key difference and why nobody should say no in an example like yours. Any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better myself. I was going to go back and give you one more example. If you don't mind, I'll be really quick about it. It's going to sound trivial, but it hits close to home. Again, I'm in the business, and anyone that knows me that's listening to this will know I'm pretty self-assured about what I know and how much I know, to the point of getting made fun of on that front. I have a 22-year-old daughter. She just got out of college. She's going off, getting off my payroll and going on somebody else's. And because of Benefits All In, I took advantage of it. I wanted a test case. I wanted her to go through and see, is it better for her to stay on dad's plan, or is it better for her to go look at something else? Now, if you'd asked me before she went through that process, I would have told you all day long, Adam, it would have been better for her to stay on my employer-sponsored plan because the contributions were better. The employer's paying something, better plan options, et cetera. Because of the state she lives in, she's on Medicaid right now. She's working, and Medicaid's paying for a good chunk of her premium, and she's got arguably a much better plan for her at point in time. So it's not a tragic situation. It's not a tough situation. But even that kind of analysis, Adam, that doesn't have a tremendous impact on the plan, it's not a $2 million claim, that happens every single day at Benefits All In.
It's amazing. So since you've been in the industry just as long as I have, what I love to ask is, you've seen it all, right? I mean, you've seen the pre-Obama care days, post. You've seen the transparency, or what I like to call lack of transparency, even though we have all these rules and laws surrounding transparency. Where do you see, what is the biggest change you think is going to happen over the next 5 years within this industry?
I think the generation, my daughter's generation, the 20-something to 30-something that are entering the workforce right now or have been there for a few years, no offense to you and I and all the Gen Xers out there, I think they're more educated or can educate themselves quicker on any topic faster than we ever could. Doesn't require a trip to the library and 3 hours worth of research for them to find out what a CPT code or an ICD-10 code is. Change that I see coming is there's going to be a lot more upfront education that happens at the employee level that's going to force systems, hospital, healthcare provider systems, and carriers to have a lot more answers that make sense quicker than they do now. Because the answers we get now make no sense because they're not meant to answer the question. They're meant to just, they're meant to be like that customer service line that puts you in a loop and you never get an answer. That's not, by the way, that's not thrown at that's across the industry, any facet of it. And I think that generation's going to be far more well-informed, due to ease of access. And that'll demand, I won't call it transparency. I don't think it'll ever be transparent, but I do think there'll be a greater demand for information than there has before. Information that makes sense.
And that's what you guys are bringing, is information that makes sense for individual people. No question.
Yes.
So, off topic. You've done a lot in your career, right? You've done I'm assuming you've had a lot of different jobs. I love to tell people that I have never eaten at a Domino's pizza since I was 18 years old. Because when I was 17 and a half, I applied for a job at Domino's and got rejected. So I literally have not gone back, never will, doesn't matter. I don't care if it's the last place to eat. Any cool job or different kind of job or just something unique in your past that you love to share with our listening audience?
Well, again, anyone that knows me well is not going to be surprised by this, but since you don't know me too well, Adam, you'll get to know me real quick with this. At the end of college and in the early part of my work careers, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I used to give tours of historical homes. So if you go up to Rhode Island and you go to the Breakers, or you go to the Stephen Hopkins house, or you go to the John Brown house, if you'd have gone there in 1993 or 94, there's a good chance you would have seen a much thinner, I'll say arguably younger, more handsome fella giving tours with this same nasally voice, and did that for a while.
How long did you do that job? And how'd you get into that?
I went to school and studied history. As you mentioned, Brown's a small school, so you get to know a lot of people really quickly. And one of the guys that I had a bunch of history classes with, he got a job there because he was, good in class. And one of the professors hooked him up. He got a job at the Stephen Hopkins house. He asked me if I wanted to fill in for him. He ended up getting another job up in Mass that was more, lucrative. So I kept that job, and, that New England connection of tours of rich homes just kind of sprungboard into giving tours of a few.
So what's the coolest thing that you found out about one of these homes that you were at?
The amount of money that is spent on some of that furniture that sits in those homes to restore it and keep it. The John Brown house had 2 Chippendale Highboys. They were American-made Chippendale Highboys. So they're large dressers that stored silverware and flatware and bone china, etc. They had a matching pair, and they were running out of money in the 80s. So they took one of them that was the more pristine of the 2, and they auctioned it off at Christie's. They got enough money off that auction. So think 1988, 89. They got about $11 million for that Highboy because it was a one of one.
Wow.
One of 2, matching pair. Right. They kept the other and restored it. And, at the time, that was a lot of money, and that, funded that endowment for that home for years. So I'm sure I got some detail wrong, but I was just amazed by that. I'm originally from New Mexico. The most expensive piece of furniture we had in the house was the TV, so.
Yep. So last thing, how can listeners learn more about Benefits All In?
Other than contacting any of us directly, the easiest way is to go online, benefitsallin.com.
Awesome. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today as much as I did. Our guest was Philip Martin, VP of Benefits All In. And don't forget, folks, tune in at 10 a.m., 6 p.m., and 2 a.m. Eastern Time on Healthcare Now Radio. And as I always say, let's go Cleveland Guardians.